Israeli authorities have recalled their negotiators from Qatar after reaching a dead end in talks to release hostages held by Hamas in Gaza, according to a statement from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office. The negotiations had led to a temporary truce between Hamas and Israel, but it collapsed after 7 days. Israel blamed Hamas for failing to fulfill its part of the agreement, which included the return of all women and children held hostage. The negotiators were from Israel's Mossad intelligence service, and it was the head of the agency, David Bernea, who recalled the team. The talks broke down on Saturday when Israel insisted on the release of a group of women. But Hamas refused. Hamas then proposed discussing the release of men on different terms. But Israel rejected the idea, emphasizing the importance of releasing all women first. Hamas, in a statement, held Israel and the United States responsible for ending the dialogue. The militant group claimed that Israel refused its offers to exchange prisoners and hand over the bodies of hostages who had died during the bombardment of Gaza. Salah al-Aruri, deputy head of Hamas Political Bureau, confirmed that negotiations had ended and stated that no more hostages would be released until there is a ceasefire. The remaining hostages being held by Hamas are current or former soldiers, and al-Aruri stated that adult males would be subject to different standards by Hamas. Israeli and U.S. officials believe that Hamas is still holding a number of women in their 20s and 30s, many of whom were kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival. However, Hamas insists that some of the remaining women they are holding hostage are considered part of the IDF, which Israel denies. The Israel Defense Forces reported that there are still 136 hostages being held in Gaza, including 17 women and children. It is unclear how many of them are being held by Hamas specifically. Qatari and American mediators are still working to find a way to bring back a temporary halt in the fighting, as Vice President Kamala Harris stated after speaking with the Emir of Qatar. Harris expressed concern over the civilian suffering in Gaza and emphasized the need for a pause in the fighting to allow for the release of hostages and the delivery of aid. Meanwhile, the Israel Defense Forces resumed their offensive, carrying out over 400 strikes in the first 24 hours of renewed fighting. The Hamas-run Ministry of Health in Gaza reported that most of the victims were women and children, with dozens feared dead after a building in the Jabalia refugee camp was targeted. Among the victims was Dr. Sufyan Taya, a prominent Palestinian scientist and the president of the Islamic University of Gaza. In response to what it called Zionist massacres against civilians, the military wing of Hamas launched a barrage of rockets towards Tel Aviv. Despite the resumption of hostilities, negotiations continued in Qatar before the collapse of the truce. However, there were concerns that Hamas may no longer be holding enough women and children to persuade Israel to continue the pauses in fighting. Israel had agreed to extend the truce daily for every 10 hostages released by Hamas, and it released 3 Palestinian prisoners for every hostage.